So today I want to talk about something just a little more serious with the story I'm going to tell you. This is an absolutely true story. And I'm telling you the story because of how important I believe that it is for us to hear the voice of God, to listen to the voice of God, to pay attention, to obey Him. I think that that's becoming more and more important in our lives. I think that for those of us that are followers of Christ, it's going to become more and more necessary for us to really be able to follow His lead, even if it doesn't make sense to us. So today's story, absolutely true, is about a girl when she was 17. She was at an event and she met a boy that was 19. He, I guess, thought she was cute or whatever, and so he introduced himself to her, and she just kind of had a funny feeling in her gut that maybe she shouldn't be talking to him. And so he was trying to really get her engaged in a conversation. And so she tried to politely, I need to go, I'm meeting some friends. I need to go do whatever. And so she tried to walk away. Well, he followed her. And he kept following her all day at this event. He just kept hanging out with her. I guess that's one way to get somebody's attention. And so she finally just, was like, in this conversation with him and about whatever, and I'm sure he was probably trying to impress her or something. Isn't that what 19-year-old boys do with 17-year-old girls? I don't know. So she said that she began to have this vision, like a very clear, vivid vision. She'd had visions from God before. She didn't really tell a lot of people about that because for her, where with the people she was around and all, they would think that she would, kind of be like, oh, okay, yeah, oh, whatever, yeah, vision from God, and so they were like going, yeah, I know, I get them too. So she kind of kept those things to herself, but she said this vision happened where she was standing in this kitchen that she'd never been in before, and she saw this woman that was standing at the kitchen sink, and she was doing dishes. And she was looking out her kitchen window, and she said, I could hear her thoughts. And she was like, I wonder why he's not back yet. I'm sure everything's okay. He probably just got caught up into a conversation or something. He'll be here anytime soon now. I'm sure everything's fine. And she said that as she saw this in this vision, that she knew and if you've ever had God drop something in your spirit, sometimes you just know something. You can't explain how you know it, but you know it. And she knew that this guy that she was talking to was this woman's husband. And he sure didn't look 19. He looked a lot older than 19, and she had been kind of suspicious on that anyway. And she knew that he was out looking for somebody to cheat on his wife with. He was out pursuing young women, and her thought was, oh my word, he's trying to pursue me to cheat on his wife? That ain't gonna happen. And so she said to him, she stopped him, and she goes, hey, wait. She goes, you're not 19, you're much older. And he goes, no, I'm 19. And she's like, no, you're much older, and you're married. In fact, you're out looking for somebody to cheat on your wife with. And he's like, look, I don't know what you've been smoking or drinking, but I'm 19. I'm a kid. I don't even have a girlfriend. And so she said, well, then show me your driver's license and prove to me that you're 19. So he goes, okay, no problem. So he took out his driver's license, and he was 19. Not for much longer. He was almost 20, but he was 19. And so then she's like going, well, then that doesn't make sense. And I wonder what that was about. And she began to question the vision. And so she just kind of, slid on past that, and then like, okay. And so this guy just kept, pursuing her. He kept calling her. He had gotten her phone number from one of her friends. And so eventually she just was like, you know what? He seems like a fine guy. I don't know what that was, but I must not have seen it right or understood it right. I'm sure that I didn't get that right. So she began to, as he pursued her and just was trying to sweep her off her feet, he kind of did. And so she was like, yeah, he seems like an okay guy. And before you knew it, they were seeing each other, and then they were engaged, and then they were married, because she turned 18 shortly after that too. So they were of age, they got married, and started a life together. Now, she said it was a little bit odd, almost like after they got married, he wasn't the guy he had been. And he would tell her things and say things that, the way I explain these things is, that you're telling me something where 1 and 1 is not adding up to 2, but it's adding up to 3 or 7 or 15, but it's not adding up to 2, and yet 1 and 1 is 2, and that's kind of how I explain those things when I know somebody's not really being honest with me. And she said she knew, she could just tell he wasn't really being honest with her. And she had this horrible gut feeling that she'd done a wrong thing in marrying this guy, but she was married to him. She needed to honor the marriage, and she kept trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. She just wanted to be a good Christian wife. And so several years passed, she said, and then one day she was at home alone doing some things, and she had just finished doing the dishes, and the phone rang, and it was a friend of hers wanting to know, can we come over? My husband and I need to come see you. We've got something we need to tell you, and we want to tell you in person. So she's like, yeah, sure, fine, and so they came over, and they're like, we found some things out, and we have some proof. And so she said they laid this out before them, that her husband was out running around with other women. And they didn't just come with hearsay, but they actually brought proof, and they brought witnesses, and they were very concerned about, her being okay, and that, this wasn't right, and he shouldn't be doing this. And as they were telling her this, she said she was devastated. She felt like she was going to pass out. Like she just couldn't believe that this was actually happening. And, and she'd see the proof, and she'd hear the witnesses, and it was overwhelming for her. And then everything clicked together, that just before they called, she had been in her kitchen, standing at her sink, doing her dishes, looking out the window, and wondering why her husband wasn't back yet. Surely he was okay. He probably just ran into somebody or something and got caught in a conversation or whatever. He just got busy. I'm sure everything's fine. And then the phone had rang. And she was like, this vision started rolling back. And she said she ran into her kitchen and went down to the end where she would have been standing in this vision, and looked at that kitchen sink and looked at the kitchen. And she was like, and it dawned on me, this is the kitchen that I saw in that vision. I'm the wife that I saw in that vision. I'm the one that he's cheating on me. And it didn't make sense at the time, but God had tried to warn me. He had tried to tell me what was going to happen if I didn't walk away from this guy. And so she said it was a huge eye-opener. Now, she said they tried to work their marriage out, because when she confronted him, he was like, yeah, and, and then, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. But she said it just ended up being a pattern. And she feeling that that's what she was supposed to do, she had stayed in the marriage, and she kept fighting for it to go the distance. And she was still going the distance when she had told me this story. So I listen to that, and I think about in my own life, times when God showed me something that didn't really make sense in the moment, and how I've kind of had to say, okay, I'm going to put this right over here on the shelf, and keep it until it does make sense, because there must be a reason for it. And I just got done reading the book of Revelation, and I was thinking about this story, because what if, when John was on the Isle of Patmos and caught up in the Spirit, and the Lord began to show him things from the future, things he'd never seen, things he didn't understand, things that didn't make sense to him. What if he'd said, this doesn't make sense? And what if he dismissed it instead of sharing the vision, so that for those of us that it is making sense now as we're seeing it unfold, what if he hadn't done that because it didn't make sense to him? What if when God came to Noah and said, I'm going to make it rain, and there'd never been such a thing as rain before, and I'm going to flood the earth, and I need you to build this big boat, and I need you to put all these animals on it and all. Do you know when God told him that, it was another 100 years, 100 years later before it actually happened? What if during that time he's like going, it's not happening. I must have heard wrong. People called him the crazy preacher because he was warning them. And they're like, yeah, it ain't happening. What if he'd given up into that pressure? I have a sign on my wall that to remind me of things like this. And it says, it's hard to be Noah when it hasn't rained. You know what? Sometimes when God tells us something, it doesn't make sense in that moment. But if I know the voice of God when he speaks to me, then I can hang on to it and say, okay, but I know that's the voice of God. It may not make sense in this moment, but I'm going to keep that right here, and I'm going to listen to him. And I'm not going to just hear what he's saying to me, but I'm going to pay attention to it, and I'm actually going to act on it. If he is, I wonder if she would have pursued God more than allowing this young man to pursue her. If she'd said, okay, but you gave me this vision. It's not making sense. But what are you trying to tell me? Would God have gone the extra mile? Would God have kept revealing things to her until she understood that if you keep talking to this young man, you're going to end up marrying him, and he is going to devastate your heart? Would God have done that? I think he would have. I think that he will keep talking to us as long as we'll keep in the conversation. But if we get to that point where we go, it doesn't make sense. You know what? He seems like a good guy. I think she quit listening to God. In fact, I'll bet you anything that God still, even though she wasn't pursuing that God was still showing her things. If she looks back, she'll see that God was still, all the way to the altar, God was showing her, don't marry this guy. But she did it anyway, and it cost her. It cost her dearly. So that's the thought I want to leave you with today. I know this is a little longer. I didn't know how to shorten the story because I wanted to get it all in there. How important it is for us to hear the voice of God, to listen and pay attention and obey him. And, I did the video on the cost is going up. Yeah, the cost to follow Jesus is going up, and so is the necessity of really listening to him. All right. If you haven't subscribed yet, I hope you will. I hope you share the videos that touch you with your friends, and that you hit that notification bell so that you know each day when my new video comes up. I am enjoying getting to share these stories with you. I'm enjoying the comments and the feedback that I'm getting on them, and just feeling like I'm really doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now for the Lord. So you have a wonderful day today, and I will talk to you later. And yes, I always say I love you, and you may go, but you don't know me. But you know what? God knows you. He loves you. Therefore, I love you. All right. I'll talk to you later.